Good afternoon. My name is Abdus Muhammad, and I am the manager of student success here at Khalifa University. This afternoon, we're going to go over in the workshop, combining strengths through positive teamwork, some tips that you can utilize in your everyday lives in order for you to achieve this particular goal. So as you can see here, we have the title and we have a separation in the title. So we have combining strengths in the first portion and we have positive teamwork in the lower portion. And so we've separated the two to give you an indication of what a lot of teams face, which is separation. Every team possesses people who have strengths. So whether you're in school, whether you're at work, you're there because you have a certain level of expertise and you have skills and you have strengths that you can contribute to that particular organization or group. The second portion is where there are some issues that people face when trying to come together as a group, and that is positive teamwork. And so this is what we're going to stress and emphasize on in this particular lecture. So beginning with ourselves, before we're able to contribute to a group, we have to make sure that we have a very strong foundation and we're able to contribute in a positive manner. And that happens with first looking at a paradigm. What do we mean by a paradigm? A paradigm is what you see. And I don't necessarily mean what you see in terms of what's directly in front of you. What I mean by see is how you perceive a particular situation. And how you see a particular situation, as we'll see in some of the examples, it affects what you do. And so we move from a paradigm of seeing to actions. What do you do as a result of that particular action? Or what do you do as a result of viewing a particular scenario in a certain way? And then we move on to the results. So after you've seen, you interpret a particular situation in a certain way, you do things based upon how you interpret a particular situation, and then you get the results. Now, they may not necessarily be the results that you want, but you'll definitely get results. And so what we're trying to do is try to make sure that we get positive results all the time based upon what we see, controlling what we're able to see, and then mapping, strategizing what we do in order to get effective results. So if you look at this object here, everybody knows what it is. Hopefully we don't drink too much of it. It's a can, right? And so if it's sitting there on the table or sitting in your refrigerator, it's a very gentle, it doesn't harm anybody, it doesn't do anything, it's just a can, just sitting there. What happens if you shake that can? What happens if you shake the can? It becomes a completely different object, right? It has potential to cause not necessarily damage, but it can ruin a nice dress or a nice shirt that you're wearing. So if we look at the can as a situation, so this can is a situation, and this can represents how you see things, okay? So let's just imagine you had a really stressful day at work or at school, and you're meeting your colleagues to complete a particular assignment. So you have a deadline that you need to meet for the next day, and you're meeting with your colleagues or your classmates. Have a stressful day, meeting with people. As you're driving, someone cuts you off, almost causing a major accident. So as you can see there, that can is being shaken, right? And so as you arrive, you realize that the cord of your computer is not in your bag. So you only have 25%, and you have presentations to do. When you arrive, your colleagues or your workmates are looking at you, staring at you funny. And your interpretations, what you see is that they're not happy with you. How do you feel? How do you respond? So what do you see in that particular situation? Now remember, we said how you see, how you interpret a particular situation results in what you do. So in that particular situation, you have the choice to see what your colleagues, how they may be particularly viewing your situation. Is your situation bad? Is your situation horrible? And if you view the situation as being bad, what would you do based on how you see in the situation? If the situation is seen as being negative, you may have a negative response. If you can somehow interpret or see the situation as being a positive situation, being able to seize that opportunity to take control over your destiny, over the situation, then the outcome may be positive. What are some possible results of what you do in that situation? Now, if the situation is being viewed as negative, then the possible solutions are many, and none of them are good. So the question is, who is responsible for what you see? So like we said, you had a stressful day. Who's responsible for you viewing or your interpretation of your day? Who's responsible for how you interpret that situation, that scenario where someone cut you off? Was it their fault? Was it your fault? Were they racing to a loved one in the hospital? How do you interpret that situation? When you arrive at your meeting with your colleagues or your classmates, and they're looking at you, and you interpret that situation as they're being negative, as they're blaming you, and they may be very well have been worried about you. So how you see this particular situation, as we said, results in what you do. So the actions that you take, are they going to be positive actions? Are they going to be negative actions? And obviously, then there is a result. So we're going to learn some practices that will help us in the beginning deal with what we see, to be able to produce actions that are constructive and get the results that we want. So the first practice is the most important practice. We won't be able to move and implement any of the other practices without really focusing and mastering this particular activity or this particular practice, which is the power of now. The power of now is a process of neutral observation about one's thoughts without interpretation, without connecting or playing a tug of war with your thoughts. Okay, let's say that again. The power of now. So you have a situation, you're stressed out, you almost had a car accident, you arrive at your place of work with your group, and you see people looking at you. Things automatically go off in your brain. We say pause. We say seize the opportunity of the power of now. So the power of now, as we said, is a process of neutral observation. What we mean by neutral is that you don't take sides. We know that you have things going off in your brain. Oh my God, these people hate me. Why are they looking at me? You don't have a right to look at me. And then all these different thoughts start going into your brain, right? What we're saying is allow those thoughts to happen, but remain neutral. Don't pick a side. So it's a process of neutral observation about one's thoughts without interpretation. Leave it. Let your thoughts happen. Let all of the negative and positive thoughts take place. It's natural for these things to happen. But we say be neutral and don't interpret them, because these thoughts are not constructive. And it says without interpretation, connecting. So you don't associate yourself with either of the two. And you definitely don't play a tug of war with your thoughts. Have you ever tried that? When you're in a situation, you're upset, you know you shouldn't lash out, and you're playing this tug of war with, oh, I shouldn't say that, but I'm gonna say it. I shouldn't say that, but I'm gonna say it. I shouldn't say it. 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to say it. So what we're saying is don't interpret, don't connect, and definitely don't play a tug of war with your thoughts. And so what happens after a thunderstorm? So a thunderstorm are those negative thoughts that go into your brain and you trying to rationalize and trying to make sense out of a situation. A thunderstorm, we know a thunderstorm is loud, it's scary. It's very similar to that can. That can be very loud if you allow it to open up and explode. And it can be very scary if you're wearing a nice outfit that particular day. So after a thunderstorm that is loud and aggressive, there will be some calm. The thunderstorm does not stay. And this is the similitude of your thoughts. When the thunderstorm happens, no interpretations, no association, and definitely not playing a tug of war, and you will eventually calm down. When though, no one ever stays angry or upset or sad forever, okay? But it's your opportunity to utilize the power of now when you are ready to use it, not after the storm has passed. So the second practice is using positive language. So after you've implemented the first most essential practice, which is the power of now, is the practice of using positive language. Positive language releases stress. So you were stressed. You had a stressful day, someone almost cut you off, you reach your workplace and people are looking at you and you've interpreted that look already, you're stressed. By using positive language, you release that stress. It's a physical process. So when you use positive language, things are going to be okay. It's not that bad. Something can be done. Using all of this positive language allows you to feel good. And then it allows you to think effectively so that you are able to make positive and effective decisions. So the third practice is focusing on your circle of influence. What is within your capacity? So you concentrate on things you can affect, not on the things that you have neither any control over or can affect. So we say the things that you can affect because it's not necessarily you can grab and take control over the situation, but you can affect the situation. How? With looking at the situation in a positive way, establishing your own paradigm for the situation, and followed by putting positive language into practice. Those are things you can definitely influence. And then with respect to your place of employment or your school, your workplace at school, there are things that you can do, and we're going to cover some of those in the practices to come. So in this video, we're going to look at how you can carry your own weather. And what we mean by carry your own weather is how you're able to carry how you interpret a particular situation. Your weather is how you view, how you see your own respective paradigm. And so first you must create your weather before you're able to carry it. Okay, so in this video, we'd like you to pay close attention to how they do this.
Monday morning, and it's raining. A gray, melancholy day. On a day like this, maybe we can be excused for feeling gray and melancholy ourselves. We get into a mood, and the whole day seems to go badly. Don't you feel better when the weather outside is great? Well, what if you could carry your own weather within you? What about the social world we live in? Don't you feel better when you're treated better? That's being reactive to what we could call the social weather, the social culture. When you carry your weather with you, you can choose to be consistent regardless of how people treat you. That's what it means to be proactive. Being reactive is the opposite of being proactive, not taking responsibility for our own life. You always see yourself as a victim. of the weather, of your moods, of someone who has it in for you? Habit one is based on the principle that your life is the result of your own decisions, not your conditions, not what's happening around you. That's why habit one is so foundational, so basic. Unless you practice habit one, you can never practice the other habits of highly effective people. Years ago, I was doing research in a library in Hawaii. While thumbing through a book, I came across an idea that changed my whole outlook. The author said something like this: between what happens to us, that is the stimulus, and our response is a space. In that space lies our power and our freedom to choose our response. And in those choices lie our growth and our happiness. This insight sunk deep into my heart. Even in the midst of challenging circumstances, we have this exhilarating power to choose how we will respond. For instance, the great Viktor Frankl, the Jewish Austrian psychiatrist imprisoned in the death camps of Nazi Germany during World War II, experienced unbelievable indignities and tortures. He was raised to believe that you are basically a product of your childhood. But while he was in the death camp, he began to observe some very interesting things. Different people reacted differently to the same circumstances. He himself experienced terrible things. Some of his own loved ones were killed. One day they stripped him, put him under lights, and performed experiments upon his body. At that lowest possible point, he discovered what he called the last human freedom. The power to choose your own response to any condition, to anything that happens to you. During his darkest moments, Frankl would visualize himself lecturing to his students in Austria following his release. He pictured himself teaching them about the very experiences he was having then. He came to believe that the most basic human capability of all is that between stimulus and response, man has the freedom to choose. Frankl later determined the thing that enabled survival in the death camps was not necessarily intelligence or survival skills, but a sense of purpose, a contribution yet to be made. This became the basis for his brilliant autobiography, Man's Search for Meaning. It's not what people do to us that hurts us. It's our chosen response to what they do that hurts us. As Gandhi put it, they cannot take away our self-respect if we do not give it to them. We must simply never build our emotional life around the weaknesses of other people. Otherwise, we give them permission to continue to mess up our lives. We give our future away. Several years ago, I was making a presentation on this subject of proactivity, and a woman stood up in the middle of my speech and started to give a speech on her own, spontaneously. She was filled with explosive learning and excitement. You could see it in her eyes, her gestures, her body language. And then she sensed the inappropriateness of what she was doing. She sat back down. I could hardly wait until the break to talk to her. "What happened to you?" I asked. She shared her story. She said, "I'm the full-time nurse to an extremely miserable man. He doesn't even acknowledge me, let alone show me any form of appreciation." She went on to explain that this elderly man, entrusted to her care, was absolutely miserable and took his misery out on her. She was becoming more and more depressed and hated the thought of going to work each day and facing this irritable man. All of the other nurses felt the same way. They talked even of his demise, wished for it, hoped for it, while they were taking care of him. Then she said something to me. "For you to stand up there and suggest that I am choosing to be miserable was almost too much. But then, listening to you, I suddenly realized that I do choose to be miserable. Before, I believed I didn't choose it. He made me. But then I realized how dependent I am. I'd given my power over myself to him and his miserable behavior. As I thought about what you were saying, she said, I realized I had the power to choose and felt like I had been let out of prison. That's why I stood up. I could not contain myself. I just can't tell you what that means. This feeling of freedom is almost overwhelming. We have the power and the freedom to choose, to create our own weather each day. As Fulton J. Sheen once said, each of us makes his own weather, determines the color of the skies in the emotional universe which he inhabits.
So in the two videos, we're able to see very clear examples of how one is able to not only carry their weather, but create their own weather. So in order to combine strengths, which is what we all seek to do through positive teamwork, we must first think positively, create our own weather, and then be positive, which is carry our own weather. So in another short video, we're going to watch how someone creates, beginning with creating his own weather, and then seeing how they have the power to define their own respective lives outside of any outside influences. So what we saw in this video is art. And the art is a representation of our lives. And the people and the individuals that are creating the art are ourselves, if we allow ourselves to do so. So applying these practices, the practices of, the practices of the power of now, using proactive language and focusing on the circle of influence, being able to do these things, you will free yourself. You'll free yourself and your ability to actually create your own masterpiece. You will decide what colors, because you're the one who creates your weather and you walk around with your weather. So you define who you want to be, which are the colors. You decide the strokes that you're going to use, not someone else. You decide where you'll make the changes in the form of additions or subtractions, not someone else. You will define your life so that you can share it with your respective community. And that brings us to practice number 4, or habit number 4, which is think win-win. So with win-win, we've learned with the first 3 practices that focus exclusively on ourselves. So the power of now are things that we do to ourselves, for ourselves. What we do is for the benefit of ourselves, and the result is for the benefit of ourselves. In this particular practice now, what we're saying is that we have the ability now to take all this positive results and now share it with our communities, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's outside within the communities, whether it's in our respective workplaces. So to think win-win, you consider your wins and the wins of others. It's not only about you. It's not only about what you're able to achieve and your accomplishments, but it's the accomplishments of the entire group. So we've learned how to see, to think, and to do, all in a very positive manner. We can now begin to put into practice the elements necessary to use that positivity while contributing to a team. So we begin with ourselves to establish the mentality that a win for one member is a win for others. So as you can see, when we begin with a particular mentality with ourselves as individuals, and when moving from ourselves to a group, we're also beginning with a mentality. And that mentality is that there's enough for everybody and we can all benefit. So a common paradigm, a common way of thinking that is not necessarily what we're looking for is that the more you get, the less there is for me. So it's a competitive way of thinking. And what we're trying to introduce to you is there is more than enough for everybody. Everyone can win, especially when you're in a team. There are no losers when you're working collectively together. There's no I win and you lose when you're working with a team. When you succeed, I succeed. And when I succeed, you succeed. And so the practice that we'd like you to adopt is, the first one is to build your emotional bank account with other people. What does that mean? Bank account, when we first think about bank account, we think about money. Everyone loves money. We don't necessarily mean cash money, but what we mean is an emotional bank account, which means the emotional relationships, these positive relationships that you're able to build. How are you able to build those relationships? You're able to build those relationships because when something happens, you're able to implement the power of now. You're able to stop and pause. You're able to use proactive and positive language. Everyone loves that. That type of energy is addictive. Any positive person will tell you, or any negative person will tell you, that when someone is positive, people naturally gravitate towards them. And then focusing on the things that you can influence are solutions to issues that you may have. And so the practice here for win-win is to build an emotional bank account with other people. Build relations with people. Let people know that you are in fact positive. Let people know that you're not an explosive person. That when something arises, you take time to pause, to think about possible scenarios. That you are in fact trying to use positive language in order to address a particular issue. The second habit is to have an abundance mentality. And this is very important, especially when you're working with a team, is that there is enough for everybody. When you're working with a group, whether it's a big group or a small group, everybody can win. There are accomplishments for everyone. Everyone can be highlighted and praised. And the third one is to consider other people's wins as well as your own wins. So when you're approaching a situation, when you're approaching work, when you're approaching group work at school, you don't approach the situation as, I am going to do X, Y, and Z. I am going to make sure that this project works. No, that's not the attitude that we're asking you to have. We're asking you to say, people's wins, your colleagues' wins, your classmates' wins are wins for you. And you should think about not only your wins, but the wins of others. So we're going to watch yet another video of a scenario where a father is trying to inculcate certain practices and behavior in the life of his child. And as a parent, sometimes when we try to do this, we do it in a manner in which we just tell our child, do X, Y, and Z, or be X, Y, and Z. I want you to be positive without necessarily giving the child the opportunity to learn the skills in order to develop into this person that we want him to be. And so we're going to watch a video, a scenario, and as we're watching this, I'd like you to pay attention to the father's ability to be in the now, to pause before he responds. I'd like you to look at how the father is able to use proactive language, how the father empowers his son, and how the father relinquishes some of his own abilities to dominate this child and allows the child to focus on his respective circle of influence. And finally, how the father creates a scenario where everybody wins. And the title of this video is Green and Clean. So as we watch the video, like I said, we'd like you to pay attention to what the wins are for the father and the son.
My little son agreed in a family meeting to take care of the yard.
I will, Dad.
Son, your job is green and clean. Let me show you what green looks like, son. Let's go over to our neighbor's house. That's the color we're after, son. Clean means, let's clean up half of it. Now notice that compared to that. That's green and clean, son. Your job is green and clean. Now, son, how you do that is up to you. I'd tell you how I do it if you want.
How'd you do it, Dad?
I turn on the sprinklers. But you may want to use buckets or hose or spit all day long. All we care about is what, son?
Green and clean.
What's green look like? Good. What's clean? Good. It's your job, son. Guess who your boss is, son?
Who?
You boss yourself. Guess who your helper is?
Who?
I am. You boss me.
I do?
If I ever have any time you need help, you just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And guess who judges you, son? That's right, you judge yourself. How do you think you judge yourself, son?
Green and clean.
What's green now? What's clean now? Good. Is that a deal, son? You think about it for a day or two. Saturday. How do you feel, son?
I'll do it.
Do what?
Green and clean.
How?
It's up to me.
Who's your boss?
I boss myself.
Who judges you?
I judge myself.
How do you judge yourself?
Green and clean.
What's green? Good. Clean? Good. Who's your helper?
You are if you have time.
What if I don't have time?
I gotta do green and clean.
Is that a deal, son?
Deal.
Deal was made. Did nothing. Nothing all that Saturday, all that Sunday. Monday, it's Tuesday morning, going to work. Hot, summer day, burning up, yellowing, neighbor's yard, green and clean, manicured. Garbage strewn right down the side lawn from a Saturday night barbecue, falling out the bottom of the sack, 3 feet from my car. I could rationalize a little away, Saturday and Sunday. But Monday, this is inexcusable. I was ready to move to win-lose. Now, son, you get out there, you get over here, or I'm telling you, the moment you do, you kill the goose. You kill effectiveness. You go for efficiency. Yeah, he'll clean that up. And what happens tomorrow when you're not there? Bite your tongue. Reaffirm your purpose. Raise boys, not grass. I'll see what it looks like tonight. Could hardly wait to get home. Driving, going around the corner, there where my yard was. Tuesday afternoon, more cluttered, more yellow than ever. My son across the street, playing ball. I was burning. We'd agree that we'd walk around the yard twice a week. He'd show me how it's going. Hi, son. How you doing?
Just fine, Dad.
I was faking it totally. How's it going in the yard, son?
Just fine, Dad.
I bit my tongue. After dinner, why don't we walk around? You can show me how it's going. Before we got to the door, you could see his lip. By the time we got out in the front yard, just open bawling.
So hard.
I mean, what was hard? He hadn't done one single thing. I'll tell you what hard is moving up the level of initiative. You cannot hold people responsible for results if you supervise their methods. Anything you want me to do to help, son?
Would ya?
What was our agreement?
You'd help me if you had time.
I've got time.
You do? I'll be right back.
Ran in the house, came out with 2 sacks. He handed me one, he took one. That's when he signed the win-win agreement. And he only asked for help a couple more times that entire summer. It's his job. It takes time to set up the agreement and to reaffirm it. The tendency is to backslide on it when you see mistakes. Keep believing in the people. Holding them accountable in the way agreed.
Okay, so what are the wins for Stephen and his son? So Stephen, he can be an example of what sort of a manager would be, a role of a person who has an authority. And his son would be a subordinate. He would be someone who's actually working for the manager. Or we can look at it as a different light, a team leader. So when you're in school and you are dealing with a project, that project leader would be the father. And the son would be the members of the group. So as we saw in the video, we saw that Stephen put into practice these elements that allowed his son to develop the behavior that he was looking for. It wasn't necessarily completing a particular task. He could have easily just said, get the bag and go and pick up the garbage. But that's not what his particular win was. His win was to create behavior and to create a scenario where the environment was constructive, that the son was able to ask his father for assistance. The son was able to actually utilize his father. His father made himself at the disposal of his child. If you need some assistance, I'm here to help you. His father told him what he wanted to do. The directives were very clear. And when those directives didn't happen, he didn't explode like the can. He paused. He used the power of now. And then he used proactive language when speaking to his son, inquiring, what did you do? Are you having any difficulties? is there anything I can do to help you to solve this problem? And then focusing on his circle of influence. Now, like we said, his circle of influence was the entire project, but that's not what his goal was. That's not what his win was. His win was to create behavior. So moving on to the final element when trying to build positive group work, positive teamwork, is when faced with difficulty, when faced with opposing views and opposing ideas in a group where everyone thinks that they're right, yes, we do implement those strategies that we've previously mentioned, but we also need to first understand. So seek first to understand, then to be understood. So the common paradigm that many people have, unfortunately, is when dealing with a situation where you have opposing views is, I need to make sure that people understand me. So listen to me. You need to understand my point of view. And this other person who's speaking, you're not even listening to him. Whatever they're saying, you're developing in your brain counter arguments. So you're not even thinking about it. You're just waiting for the opportunity for that person to take a breath, and then you jump in, right? So the common paradigm is, I need to make sure people understand my point of view. Listen to me. Do you understand what I'm saying? And what we're saying is that you have time for that. You have time to have someone understand your point of view. So the highly effective paradigm is, I have more influence when I first listen. I first listen. And I'm not listening to provide a counter argument. You're listening to practice empathy. It's empathetic listening. What is this person saying, and what is the message this individual is trying to come across? And then to respectfully seek to be understood. Now, when we say respectively seek to be understood, the manner in which that you clarify yourself is very important. If you're being dogmatic, if you're being negative and rambunctious, these things come out. And so when we say respectively seek to be understood, simply saying something like, I'd like to clarify my opinion. And the manner in which you say this really allows the person to calm down and relax and to be able to find some type of common understanding. So I'm going to give you an example of a statement, and we'll look at the possible ways of looking at it. The first being, I just quit my job. I just quit my job. So if someone says to you, one of your loved ones just say to you, especially around this time with COVID-19, I just quit my job, what would be your response? Would it be empathetic? Especially if you're depending on that salary. Would you respectively seek to understand? Now the person said, I quit my job. And how you respond, if you don't take time to pause and remain for some time in the now, and use positive language and focus on your circle of influence, and if you don't do those things and you automatically respond, you may create a situation. You may lose your financial credit that you built up, your emotional credit that you built up. So I just quit my job. Now before you give that person time to explain, you react negatively. But the second part of that sentence was, I just quit my job and got a better job. Or I just quit my job and now I'm doing something more constructive with my time. So the final two videos are going to demonstrate distinctions between responses that are what we're looking for, which are empathetic responses, and giving a person time to digest what's being said, and the opposite.
One thing that gets in the way of meaningful communication is autobiographical listening. our own story, our own experiences, our biases, prejudices, and all of our values. You see, when I listen autobiographically, part of my story gets added to your story. And then when I respond, I base it on my own frame of reference. I might ask questions, or I might agree or disagree. I might decide it's necessary to counsel you, or try to solve the problem or fix the situation. So with the best of intentions, I can end up leading the conversation. And even worse, I don't hear what you're really trying to say. Autobiographical responses fall into 4 categories. Probing, asking questions. Evaluating, like agreeing or disagreeing. Advising, that is giving counsel. Or interpreting, or trying to figure a person out or to analyze them. But don't misunderstand. Autobiographical responses can be very appropriate, especially when the emotional bank account with another person is high. But when real understanding and clarity are needed, and when the problems are very emotional, autobiographical responses only get in the way. Watch the impact of autobiographical responses in the next segment.
Doing your homework?
What's the point? I'll never use it.
Of course you will.
Classical Greek drama. Not likely.
No one gets anywhere without an education these days.
Really? Joe's got a full-time job and he's already a manager. He has his own car, his own apartment. And me? I'm not that interested in this.
But you're interested in this.
Absolutely. I just think it's a waste of time to learn something you'll never use in the real world. When I could be out working, getting a real experience, making money.
So, you want to quit. Think about your sister. She struggled in school, but she worked hard, and now
She's the queen of college and probably become a brain surgeon and in global warming. Not my sister, Mom.
I know it's hard right now, but all the effort will be worth it. When I was your age,
You wanted to join a rock band and travel the world, but instead, you chose hard work and all this.
You just have to hang in there.
No, I don't.
Fine. Quit. Move in with Joe. You think life is so wonderful, so easy? Maybe then you'd appreciate what you have here.
Fine, maybe I will.
Fine.
So for the sake of time, we're just going to evaluate this particular video. In this video, the mother, she wanted something for her son. She wanted her son to focus on school. And she wasn't listening to him empathetically. She didn't stop and try to put herself in his shoes to try to realize why he was actually having difficulty in school. She wanted to assert herself and assert her own opinions just to get her son to focus on school more. So we're going to conclude this particular workshop right now. I hope that you found some benefit. Just as a recap, we just wanted to go over really quickly the practices. The first being establishing the power of now. The second being using proactive language. The third is focusing on your circle of influence. The fourth is when you're in a team, think win-win. And finally, use empathetic language. Thank you very much. So if anyone has any questions, we'll entertain some of the questions at this time. So the first question is, how can we maintain a positive language in those hard times? As we said, in terms of a situation, you are the one who controls how you think about that particular situation. Every situation is not 100% bad. And like we said, In terms of a thunderstorm, yes, there are going to be hard times. It's going to be loud. It's going to be ugly, but it does settle. And how you're able to make conscious and positive decisions. So remember, this process is a process of you making positive, collective, proactive decisions. And in order for you to be able to do that, you have to first pause and focus on the now without thinking too far ahead in the future, and to try to make sure that those positive hormones are circulating in your brain and that your brain is clear for you to be able to take your next step. And that's it. Okay, so we thank you very much for tuning in.